Go.
Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis.
Welcome to the film cast review of Megalopolis. I'm going to read the plot summary of this movie from the internet. Quote, a conflict between Caesar, a genius artist who seeks to leap into a utopian idealistic future, and his opposition, Mayor Franklin Cicero, who remains committed to a regressive status quo, perpetuating greed, special interests, and partisan warfare, end quote.
Is that what it's about?
Sure. If you say so.
Obviously, Francis Ford Coppola has made some of the greatest movies of all time. Had probably one of the best 4 movie runs of all time. I think I saw a piece in like The Ringer or Vulture, I don't remember which one, that was trying to compare like, has there been any other director that has had a better 4 movie run than Francis Ford Coppola, who made Godfather 1, 2, Apocalypse Now, and The Conversation in one go. Helped to define cinema after he made those movies. Hugely influential, hugely talented creator. Anyway, obviously he has not been making quite as many movies lately. He's been biding his time, and then making some experimental movies like Tetro and so on, which have not been particularly well regarded.
That wasn't particularly experimental. That was a black and white movie.
Well, the Twix,
the vampire one,
right?
Twix.
He also did that whole thing. I remember being at a Comic-Con.
Twix. That's what it is.
Yeah. Is that the one with Val Kilmer?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, where it's like you decide.
I'm going to bring an iPad to the theater.
Yeah.
And I will remix this movie.
To his I kind of respect the desire to like what can we do that's new? What can we? How can we push the whole medium into a new place?
And that's the thing is like, imagine if you're in your 30s and everyone's like, you've already made the greatest movies of all time. Like, it's like, oh, well, then peaked. I can either just keep doing that or I can try to do new things. Right. And certainly he has tried to push the boundaries of what is possible.
It's almost bankrupted him like several times. By the way, this whole process. Yeah.
There's this whole concept called live cinema that he's really into of like, of wanting, the movie going experience to be alive in ways that we will discuss about this movie, actually. Especially once we get to spoilers, I think we can talk about the live participant element of this film.
It's been all the reviews, but yeah.
But anyway, so definitely this movie has a long journey to screen. He's put a lot of his own money into this. It just released in theaters. We're finally going to talk about it. Devindra Hardawar, what did you think of Megalopolis?
I had a lot of thoughts about this movie. I think it is a stunning vision of an artist, a rare form of artist. Like we are peering directly into Francis Ford Coppola's brain and seeing what's cooking in there. And now he has the technology to realize a lot of this vision too. This is a project that's been in the making for decades, apparently. So I find this movie fascinating. I think it's really cool that he has the ability and the money to like make such a grand, ambitious thing. But I also think this movie is absolutely terrible. Like that's really where I'm coming down with it. Like watching this movie in a mostly empty theater, I got to see it with my brother, so that was fun. I had like some human interaction to laugh with or something. I think there's some really interesting sequences, some really fascinating performances in this movie, and like this movie just goes for it at times. But I just feel like Francis Ford Coppola has lost the ability to tell a story or a coherent story, and this movie is about a lot of things. And it's just so genuinely incoherent. Like it's essentially the Robert Moses story. If anybody has ever read The Power Broker or knows about like what Robert Moses did to New York City, like it's about a very, very powerful city planner, an unelected person who is free to like destroy things and like wants to build things in a vision of his new era. But the movie isn't really clear really about like what the issue is, other than saying America's dying like Rome. The sort of like greed and corruption that early summary pointed to, we didn't ever really see it. What we see is we see a guy who is really high on his own supply. Adam Driver's character, Caesar Catalina, is this sort of like visionary architect who wants to build a new type of society for people. And Giancarlo Esposito's character is the mayor of New Rome, is the person stopping progress. But we never really see like why that's Why is that necessarily a bad thing? Like, there's a lot of things in this movie. They're just absolutely unclear, really wild. I think I've been reading about the production too. Like he kind of just like let the cast go wild at times. Would give them notes and lines like
it was a very
at the last minute.
collaborative process.
Yeah,
very collaborative process to write the script for this film.
What he's saying here.
A lot of improvisation, I would imagine. Yeah.
I feel like there are some like really beautiful images here. It's hard not to see this as sort of like the first scene of this movie was a teaser that they released like earlier this year. Is just Adam Driver on a roof, looks down on the Chrysler building, actually looks down at the city, snaps his fingers and stops time. And I cannot help but think like, oh man, like that's to be Francis Ford Coppola, to be a young genius who has full command over cinema as an art form, right? To create something like The Godfather and Apocalypse Now, productions, especially Apocalypse Now, which drove him mad. You know, to have that level of control over something, see how people like control how people can basically see this living dream. That does something to a person. And I think this movie is kind of a lot about that. It's also a lot about like weird, I don't know, rich people bad, man. Like it's about a lot of things that I feel like, yes, we know Francis Ford Coppola. What are you actually trying to tell us? And we'll talk more about this in spoilers. I just left it mostly frustrated while being astounded by, you know, some of the beautiful imagery. Like he can still create indelible images. I also think Aubrey Plaza is just like having the time of her life. So I really enjoyed watching her here. But oh man, this movie's all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I gotta say, I agree with the comments about the look of the movie. It is actually pretty impressive given what I understand about how this movie was made, which is the production was quite chaotic as far as I can tell, and he fired a bunch of people working on visual effects and in art on the movie because he's like he doesn't think that they could like fully capture his vision, and at times he didn't even know what his vision was. So given all that, I think there are actually moments of this movie that look pretty cool.
There's a sequence of shadows on the wall, like human shadows on the wall, which like indelible images, beautiful stuff.
Not the whole movie doesn't look great, but like there's moments that are like really, really cool. In the trailer, you see the shot of like these gigantic statues that are like falling, and you know, there's like really some great moments visually in the movie. I also gotta say, I think the outfits are kind of cool. Like it's
production design's amazing. Yeah,
it's the costume design. It's this combination of like the kind of drapery and toga-esque stuff that you get in like Roman Empire times, combined with like the formality of present day, and it's like this cool combo of the two things that I thought really worked. So I want to just start by praising some parts about Megalopolis that I thought were actually pretty impressive. All that said, Jeff Canada, I'm really curious what you thought about Megalopolis.
Well, Dave, I guess you could say what I thought about Megalopolis is best summed up in the form of a limerick.
Oh, let's hear it, Jeff.
Does greatness just mess with your head? In old age, does one lose the thread? You want to direct and self-fund this project? Come on, Grandpa, let's get you to bed.
Oh, man. Brutal.
It's more brutal than I intended.
That's one of your more brutal limericks.
Yeah, I don't mean it to sound as personal.
This is truly the alternate timeline. Jeff is just murdering fools out here. Yeah.
You know, Devindra, you talked about. Okay, the first thing you need to know about this movie is that there is no facet of it that bears any resemblance to any previous Francis Ford Coppola movie.
Really?
In my opinion.
There's a lot of Dracula in here. There's a lot of like flowy robes and like the sort of way he composites things in camera. Just like the operaticness of Dracula, a movie I love. Bram Stoker's Dracula. I felt that.
Okay. It's such a huge departure for him stylistically, in my opinion. Visually, conceptually, tonally, it's a wild thing to see him talk about, you know, what is my voice? What is my voice? And then he comes up with this thing that just doesn't appear to have any tether to anything he's ever attempted, which is, I just think, interesting. I don't necessarily think that's a criticism. I just think it's interesting. You talked about, Devindra, you talked about that first sequence, the sort of the pre-title sequence of Adam Driver, atop the Empire State Building and stepping out for it. Watching that, I was like, oh, this movie's going to be incredible. I was in it. I was like, yes, where he puts the camera, like up and like above and just kind of creating the tension of that moment and this like larger than life sort of supernatural thing that happens there. I said, whatever we get into here, it's going to be fascinating. And for a while, I think that's the case. But it becomes so meandering and so self-absorbed and ultimately just,
Yes.
I think that the reason I said, come on, Grandpa, let's get you to bed. And I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, Devindra, it is the kind of thing where someone, I suspect, getting into advanced age wants to strip away all of the trappings of life and try to get to the core of what they think is important. And oftentimes a person in that position is just saying very kind of trite, pat answers. And I think that's ultimately what this movie is. It is so sadly sincere, which is a weird thing to say. I love sincerity, in general, but like it wears its heart on its sleeve to a point where it's like, this is not insightful. It's just kind of clamoring for a simplicity that undermines its own message. It's just like, hey, can't we all just be nice to each other?
But also the future, Jeff. Don't let the
like
past
babies,
kill tomorrow.
Because like babies, because babies are the next generation, everybody. So can't we isn't it important to think about the babies? And it's like, well, obviously there's nothing that's going to be persuasive in that notion, because you're not illuminating anything to me. You're not revealing any insight into that notion. You're just trying to underscore it. And that's fine, I suppose. Like I'm normally somebody that is drawn to sincerity, wholesomeness, this notion of just like, let's idealism and sort of this what's the I can't think of the phrase, but the notion that maybe simple answers can be effective. Maybe we can let's just all be nice to each other. I'm drawn to that notion, generally speaking. But what happens in this movie is that the plot is obscured and things just happen. There's no, massive moments of plot are introduced and then abandoned. There are supernatural things that you would think would have a big impact on how the story plays out and do not. Entire subplots are introduced and just abandoned. People are killed without having any kind of repercussions for that or meaning to it. It's a complete throwing spaghetti against the wall. And the only thing that makes it cohesive are these like austere voiceover and text image
like title chapters.
Title,
chapter
yeah, that's
title.
what I was looking for. Is title cards.
Yeah,
that just like say the theme, just present it to you.
And you've got Morpheus too, like monologuing, which is always fun.
And hey, great,
love it.
Great use
love
of a voiceover. I mean, the cast is impeccable, right? Everybody wants to work with him, and what could possibly be his last project. And of course, you're going to get a who's who of the most interesting actors bringing the most interesting stuff that they can bring to bear. But to what end? Like there is you are not wrong, guys. I agree that there are visual things in this movie that are really captivating. And there are things that happen that are fascinating. And for much of swaths of this movie, I was enthralled, just on the edge of my seat, trying to untangle what is I'm supposed to pull out of this. And this is not the kind of movie that I was tempted to fall asleep during or check out of or check my phone. I'm engaged. But by the end, and we'll get to it in spoilers, but by the end, it really reveals itself to have not much to bring to the table, in my opinion. It really feels like it reveals how thin the ultimate substance of what it's trying to say is. And that, I think, is the biggest crime of this movie, because for all of its Sturm und Drang, for all of its mega-ness, its size, its strength of cast, its length, its visual flair, its flights of fancy, its sort of dreamlike imagery, all of the stuff it brings to bear. Like, yes, I applaud an artist who's going to leverage their own massive wealth to just give it to me, do something that nobody else can do. But what I want out of that is have something to say. And I don't think that what this movie has to say is interesting.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest crime, in my opinion.
I totally agree, by the way. And also, this movie is basically Metropolis, a movie that is almost 100 years old.
It's also way more John Galt than I want in a movie.
Yes.
You know, it's like, man, this dude is the Fountainhead. Like, it is very...
He was going to make Fountainhead for a long time, yeah.
It's very John Galt.
I would argue that Metropolis, a movie that is 100 years old, is more comprehensible than this movie, which is unfortunate. I'll share some of my thoughts and then let's do spoilers. I am deeply, deeply ambivalent about this movie, right? Because on the one hand, as Jeff just said, you have this situation where one of the greatest artists of all time has spent, as far as anyone can tell, over $100 million of his own money.
I see 120 is the last number people were saying.
To put his vision onto screen. And it's a grand, sweeping vision. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's there's parts of the vision that I agree with, which is that we should celebrate technology and hey, if someone has a good idea, that should be recognized, and so on and so forth. I'm putting the themes extremely charitably in my summation just now.
You are into living by, building material. Pro whatever the hell that is.
Right. Pro Megalon. I'm pro unobtainium / Megalon, which is, let's if there's a technology that can transform
what can
the world,
go wrong?
Since when has embracing any technology ever ended badly for anyone?
Which was mysteriously created by a single creator, and yeah.
So okay, but at its core, there's some ideas that are worth considering, and so and I think in general we should support sort of really brilliant creative people taking big swings. That's just at the core. That's how I feel, right? Like,
sure. That's me every time the Wachowskis have a movie, basically.
Right.
So yeah.
It's like, hey, they might not all land, they might not be for everyone, but at the end of the day, cinema and art is pushed forward when people who have original ideas try something that hasn't been attempted before, that has a huge risk of failure. And
your keyword there is original idea, and we just listed Metropolis. Go watch Fritz Lang's Metropolis. That is a tremendous movie with thematically covering the same things. You can point to so many things that this movie is kind of pulling from.
I mean, the main character's name, right, is Caesar Catalina. It's obviously heavily
just like
inspired
Planet of the Apes.
by Lucius Sergius Catalina's attempt to overthrow the Roman consuls of 63 BC.
Sure,
is my understanding.
We all remember it.
We all remember it. We all know that old chestnut. Okay. Anyway, That's
Yeah.
the case for Megalopolis, right? And obviously, there's a great cast, and there's characters named WoW Platinum, and everyone is like a lot of people are doing great work, and there's some arresting visuals, So that's all in the positive column. On the negative side, F this movie.
Basically.
Good night, everybody.
This movie is one of the worst movies I've seen this year, possibly one of the worst movies I've seen in my entire life. It's completely incoherent in terms of storytelling. Every actor appears to be performing in a slightly different film tonally. And also, I find its kind of main themes pretty reprehensible. Of like, hey, if only we would let this one savior guy do the thing that he feels like he can do.
Just let this unelected genius destroy your neighborhoods, all for the greater good.
Surely society would be improved if we let the genius do what the genius wants to do. Surely society would be improved. We've already seen in real life how that doesn't play out well. And it's almost impossible, by the way, to watch this movie and not think of it as a metaphor that Francis Ford Coppola is making about himself, right? He is Caesar Catalina or Caesar Catalina's son, who I think they say they're going to call Francis, if I'm not mistaken.
Doesn't he name...
no, the mayor's named Francis.
Oh, the mayor's son.
Maybe the son.
Okay.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I was going to say the Esposito's name is Francis.
Not Frank.
Not Frank.
Franklin.
Francis. Like when that reveal happened, I was like,
yeah, buddy.
Oh boy.
Buddy.
Oh boy.
Fair. But I think like Francis Ford Coppola, obviously somebody who has struggled to get movies made in the past. That's why there's a reason why this movie took so long to make. And
he this is not the first time he has burned tens of millions of dollars. Like he built a whole studio. He did One from the Heart. Like that whole thing.
And there is probably the sense of like, if people just recognized my genius, like life would be better for everyone. And that's kind of what Caesar Catalina's whole deal is in this movie, right? And I think that is not a type of it's not a type of thinking that I wish to encourage in any way or support. And we've seen how it can go badly. So, on the one hand, hey, I support artists doing cool, bold things. On the other hand, this movie is bad, and Francis Ford Coppola should feel bad. Those are kind of my two conflicting thoughts on the movie. There's this whole, there's this big shot of Adam Driver and his face has two sides. His face is lit by two sides. Like there's like the red and the green or the black or whatever.
The light side and the dark side.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
I'm deeply torn about the movie. Having said all that, the movie is like in many instances just like technically bad. So for instance, here's a clip that has been going viral on the internet. If you are watching this on YouTube, you won't see the whole clip because of copyright reasons. But if you are listening to the podcast version, you can hear this clip. This is a conversation between Natalie Emanuel's character and Adam Driver's character. And the reason I'm playing is just to give you a sense of what the style of dialogue of this movie is. Okay, so here it is.
And you think 1 year of medical school entitles you to plow through the riches of my Emersonian mind? So go back to the club, bear it all, and stalk the kind of people that you enjoy.
Fine.
I see nothing wrong with that, by the way. Go back to the club.
It's pretty funny the way he does that. When he does that club line is real good.
Everyone's talking about back to the club, but I have to say from now on, I'm going to say, you think blank entitles you to plow through the riches of my Emersonian mind? That is going to be a thing I say forever. So, okay, you can tell, again, on the one hand, it's like, oh, wow, that is so awful. Like, it rises to the level of Tommy Wiseau, The Room style dialogue. On the other hand, probably going to incorporate it into my daily personality.
Kind of hooks into you. And it's also like that's a whole elaborate set too. He has this beautiful breakfast in front of him. Like the imagery. This guy, like Francis Ford Coppola, still knows how to like build a compelling image. There's an image of a kiss that I think is absolutely beautiful. Like one of the most iconic things I've seen this year. It's just like it all doesn't fit together.
Yeah.
It's so infuriating. Yeah.
No one talks like this. I want to talk like this for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a fable. He says in the title.
It does say a fable.
A fable.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be.
If you're looking for realism, you've come to the wrong place.
The fable thing is, I have to say, so it's called Megalopolis, a fable. And I have to say the fable thing is ridiculous because fables are easy to understand. You know, fables have extremely simple morals.
As this movie does. As this movie actually does.
I don't
by
know.
the end, I think it is very much as childlike as a
Yeah.
That's fair. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, those are some overall thoughts of the movie. I do want to say Jeff Kanata and I did see the Q&A that occurred before Megalopolis during the IMAX, like a special IMAX screening that happened prior to the
that was the premiere
release.
at the film festival too. Yeah.
It also, it premiered at like over 100 locations, I think. Anyway, we are going to be talking about that Q&A during the After Dark this week because there's so many
it's a
wild
full meal.
moments from that Q&A that like
it's a full meal.
I didn't want to. I didn't want to like just. It needs a full conversation about it.
Just as a tease, it's a Q&A with Francis Ford Coppola, Robert De Niro, and Spike Lee.
Yeah,
Spike
Two
Lee's
out
hosting,
of three of whom have nothing to do with this movie.
So
we'll be talking about that.
Yeah, at patreon.com/film podcast. That'll be the After Dark this week. All right, let's get to spoilers for Megalopolis starting right now.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Yep.
What the hell is Megalopolis? It's just a city with good public transportation.
Not even public transportation you get from the airport.
Dude.
It's got moving walkways like every airport I've ever been to.
Imagine
if work, by the way.
The future.
No, they don't work because nobody walks on the moving walkway. They just stand in your way.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Imagine all the convenience of an airport. Transferred into the urban planning and how your city is designed.
People just want walkable cities. Like that's really the ultimate argument here. We want walkable cities. I want a city that grows with me as a person. That's all I'm asking for. I can walk to a grocery store.
And also a material that can heal your face if you get shot.
It can heal your face.
Magic. Yeah. I've got a magic metal that can levitate things and what am I going to use them for? Replicating the moving walkway at the airport.
Well, they do move fast, Jeff. He said they move pretty quickly.
They did not move
faster.
Fast. We watched someone on it.
It's like low gear, man. Low gear. But yeah, I think that to me is like the fundamental failing of like whatever they're building, whatever the dream of Megalopolis is, this movie cannot sustain it. And also whatever Mayor Francis was doing, like he wanted to build a casino. Okay, sure. That's literally every mayor in America wants to build like some shitty thing to make money. That's not the end of the world. It's not the end of civilization. Perhaps the guy imploding entire neighborhoods and people are like, now I have nowhere to live. That seems like a bigger problem. That's just me. But yeah, I couldn't stop laughing at like how little sense anything really makes in this movie.
The movie also really starts to go off the rails at the end. I really started to sense it when they cut to a flashback of Dustin Hoffman's character getting killed that we never saw in the movie.
Yeah.
So you could really tell that, like, wow, they really quote unquote found this movie in the edit. I was listening to the Going Rogue podcast, which has an excellent description of how this movie ended up in its current state. And there's an opening scene with Adam Driver showing up as they're debating kind of the building of this thing or whatever. And he does the Hamlet to be or not to be speech.
By the way, your name is Caesar and you're not going to do, I don't know, a speech from Julius Caesar?
Yeah.
Well, the to be or not to be speech is something that Adam Driver did as a kind of dramatic exercise to like get himself in the thing. And they filmed it. And then in the edit, Francis Ford Coppola is like, hey guys, you know what? Bear with me. Hear me out. What if it was in the movie?
That's funny.
Because it makes it really doesn't make any sense thematically why that speech would be there either. Because like that's
he does the whole thing. Also, it's not just like the first part.
But yeah, it does a lot.
But it's your introduction to the character.
Yeah.
Who is this kind of really bold, brash, like I know everything. That speech from Hamlet is literally about him waffling about whether he should commit suicide, right? Like, so it's not a great introduction to the character, but it's just like, but that's the kind of stuff that happens in this movie is like stuff that ends up in the movie. You're like, what? Like, why are we seeing a flashback of Dustin Hoffman's character, who, by the way, has been in 2 scenes dying? You know, it doesn't make, and it's clear like, oh, that was from a different draft of the movie. That's kind of how the whole movie feels. You're watching, you're like, oh, that scene, that was from a different draft of the movie. And you're saying that continuously throughout the entire
the moment that I was like, Well, I've stopped attempting to unravel this. Was when Aubrey Plaza is killed by an arrow from a crossbow.
Yes.
I
That was
love the
moment where I
arrow.
was like, I give up. I give up. I've
Everyone's
stopped.
favorite fast-moving weapon for an old man to wield under his bed. By the way,
Well, we are in Roman times, Devindra.
I also love, by the way, his thing before
this is New
that.
Rome. This is
you see the giant boner you're giving me? This is a boner. This is not a weapon. This is literally what he's saying.
That was his cover story.
Look at what you did to me.
Yeah.
yeah. That
At least
was pretty silly.
Pretty silly, and also he killed multiple people with arrows. In a world where guns exist, I do want to say, I didn't get to say this enough, but Aubrey Plaza, I think of anybody fully clicks into like who this movie, like what this movie wants to be. She fully understands this movie. I really enjoy watching her being very silly. At one point, she just basically, what's the word? Just like cucks Shia LaBeouf, like really dominates Shia LaBeouf. And, it was hilarious to see. I do not like seeing Shia LaBeouf on screen anymore, but it is very funny to see her like dominate that little schmuck. Yeah.
The feeling I got when this movie ended was there is an episode of The Simpsons called, what is it? The monorail, right? What is the episode?
Monorail.
It all comes back to The Simpsons.
What is the episode? Marge versus the monorail.
Marge versus the monorail. Yeah.
And the town of Springfield builds a monorail, and then it almost ends catastrophically, but then they're able to stop it from crashing and destroying and killing a lot of people. And then Leonard Nimoy, who is there at the site of the monorail, he says, "Well, my work here is done." And Barney says, "What do you mean your work here is done? You didn't do anything." And Leonard Nimoy says, "Didn't I?" And then he energizes and
he phases out.
Yeah. That's how I feel about the end of this.
He's coming back.
That's how I feel about this movie. Is at the very end, they're like, "Well, my job. I mean, there's still so much work to be done, but my primary job is done." And I'm like, "But you didn't do anything.
You didn't do anything." In fact, also like his vision of like this broad metropolis and everything. Like it's just New York, guys. Like it's just New York. It's just shooting things, and then it was also shot in Atlanta. But the iconic imagery, it is basically just New York. So yeah.
One of my favorite moments of this movie is when there is a montage.
Mm-hmm.
There's a full-on like classical 80s montage, but what is happening is indistinguishable. It is a montage of some progress that is being made, but every shot of the montage are people like rolling in their chairs and laughing or like pointing at something and nodding. There's no a montage is like we start with a skill that we're not good at, and by the end of the montage we've improved in that skill. And like he doesn't even accomplish a montage in any coherent way.
Was that them working on the like in his like his lab or whatever? Yeah.
In his
nothing's happening. They're not doing anything.
They're not doing improv anything. Comedy. Yeah. There's no progression through it. It's nothing. It isn't anything. It's a montage of nothing. Yeah. And that is another way to describe Megalopolis.
Absolutely.
It's hard. It's a shame. It's a shame because of what was leveraged to make this and what the amount of passion that seems to be at the heart of it. It's like, what is in service of what? Jeff,
I think the way I would describe this movie's ideas is it's very pro-centrism. I think is how I would describe it. It's like, we need to have a conversation. This is a line that he says, like, we need to have a conversation. If everyone just talked to each other more, everything would be better. It reminds me of Jon Stewart's Rally to Save America that he did, Rally to Save Sanity in America. It's very like, the problem is people aren't talking to each other more. Like that's the problem, is like, we just need to have a conversation and then everything would be solved. And I find that to be a very woefully outdated and unpractical piece of advice in our
But that's also not like the full thing that the movie is supporting. What the movie is really saying is we should let the geniuses be in charge and let them be geniuses. And to me, that is
describing merely one of the 18 ideas in the movie. So you're right.
That's an idea of the movie is that movie. The movie is like actually deliberately shouting down the idea of centrism. It's like it is sort of saying we can't just talk to each other. We need action. We need brilliant men to take action, destroy neighborhoods, deliver us the future, and we can save our society. There's a line that Caesar says, "Don't let the now destroy the forever." And what does that mean? What does that really? What does that really like? Yes, because at some point, the mayor is like, we need steel, we need things, we need jobs, we need things for a functioning society, and
Yeah.
Caesar can just be like, well, I have Megalon,
That's
and
the problem is-
Megalon will solve everything. What is Megalon?
I live in the now.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
I gotta kind of have to worry about that a little bit.
yeah.
The
yeah.
bigger problem, Dave, in my opinion, is not that message, which
Mhm.
like, if you want to suggest that we should listen to one another and engage in a dialogue, I'm open to that notion,
Mhm.
but have your movie express that in any way that isn't just one character saying it.
Saying it, right? Exactly. Yes.
The
the
movie
movie's not
does
interested in
not
that, yeah.
express that notion, nor does it express any of the other notions that
It does.
it just
I think it does
spouts at you.
telling. It does telling of that notion and not showing,
Right.
right? But that's kind of what. So Devindra, your point is taken about like if we just let the genius do his thing, but also that's kind of the idea that Caesar Catalina espouses. It's
Mhm.
like the idea of like, hey, we all need to like if we all just came together, we could build a better future together. It's also the notion that Francis Ford Coppola expressed during the pre-show Q&A, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
I do think that's like part of the DNA of the movie. Now we got to talk about the live interaction element of the film. When this movie premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, there was Jason Schwartzman, who plays somebody in the movie, gets up
Barely.
on stage and interacts with a character on screen, Caesar Catalina. And if you watch, I believe the way it is, you can go see something in theaters right now called Megalopolis: The Ultimate Experience, is what it's called.
Ultimate IMAX experience, I think.
Yeah,
or something like that.
and essentially what happens is, now here's the thing. This movie is edited in an extremely chaotic fashion. So what I mean by that is like scenes appear seemingly out of nowhere. The way I put it in my Letterboxd review is subplots build up to something that has no payoffs. Payoffs appear with no build up to them. Like there's just a payoff of something and then nothing happens. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like the scene that I'm describing just kind of happens out of nowhere. Like it's not like
Yes.
there's a big build up where like, oh, it's time for the person to get up on stage. In my screening, the way it's supposed to work is somebody takes a mic stand, or the mic stand's already there, walks up to it and pantomimes as though they are saying Jason Schwartzman's words from the film.
Yeah, the words are pre-recorded.
The
Yeah.
words are pre-recorded,
Well,
so they're not.
that's
actually
not the
doing
way it was supposed to be, though. Like
Mhm.
Coppola, evidently Coppola's idea about this was that, and what they actually did was they recorded a whole bunch of interactions
Yeah.
with Adam Driver and I think other actors, where they talked directly to the camera, answering questions. And Coppola like went to the Amazon people and like he's like, tell me about the people that make that Amazon Echo and how it can respond to your voice. What they wanted was a dynamic moment where someone
Yeah.
from the audience could come up and ask a question, and he had anticipated all the possible questions that someone might say in that moment, and a movie would field a question from the audience in
Right.
real time, and so you'd
Mhm.
have these these canned responses, but like myriad canned responses,
Right.
and that it would just dynamically insert the right response based on whatever somebody asked of the screen. That's how he wanted it to work.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But in reality, it worked like how I described. Now, I will say that in my screening, the effect was extremely underwhelming, because the guy gets up there. You like not everyone can even see the guy. It's not like the house lights came on or anything.
Our
And
house lights
then-
came on, but
Oh,
they
that's
were
cool.
I hear
too
it
dim,
does.
to
Yeah.
even see the
You
person.
can't see the guy. It's not clear that the person is supposed to be saying Jason Schwartzman's words necessarily.
It felt like there was some sort of error that had occurred that caused the house lights to come on, and all of
Mhm.
us were looking around like, "Uh-oh, what happened? Why are the house lights
Yeah.
on?" And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden, Adam Driver is talking right at the screen. I was like, "Oh, this is that moment that I heard about."
Right.
This
The
only
other
works
change-
once.
The other change
Yeah.
is that in the Ultimate Experience, Adam Driver's face, like his frame, appears smaller so that the eye line can be maintained. I
That
think
was
in the
the case
regular
in mine.
in the regular movie, it's like full screen. Because
Oh.
what it is Adam Driver is at a press conference and a disembodied voice asks him a question. And if you're doing the ultimate experience, there's a dude that gets up there and pretends to be the person asking him the question. I will say in my screening, the effect was not very convincing.
Yeah.
But Devindra, did you just see a regular?
I didn't see the ultimate experience. I just saw it at like an AMC here. But I was reading about this. It is not Jason Schwartzman's voice. The press team confirmed it. It sounds like him, which is the weird thing. So we don't know like where that voice is coming from. I'm just
it was Jason Schwartzman at the Cannes Film Festival. It was like him. They're person.
Saying it's not the voice. The press PR for Megalopolis says it does not belong to Jason Schwartzman. So maybe it's somebody doing a Schwartzman imitation.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. Yeah,
But it's like this thing only works once, right? It works at Cannes where you're like, whoa, what the hell is happening? And now it's like, well, now you're expecting it. Now you're expecting to have like some weird thing, and the whatever mystery there is, it doesn't work. But also, just want to point out like the technology he was asking for from Amazon. That's just like stuff you get when you call, any business and you have to go through a voice line. It's just a chat chain. Basically.
Why don't you just say the name of the movie you're looking
for? Jeff, what else are you going to say about this thing?
No, I agree with Devindra. I think it works once. I think it's a trick that works once, and I don't even know Can you imagine if he had managed to pull off, like, at some point, does somebody get selected from the audience to be able to go up and ask a question? It's like, what the hell is happening in this movie? That's my question.
But here's the thing, guys. Despite the fact that that component of it was a complete and utter failure, at least he's trying something. He's trying to do something that changes.
We can only say this so many times.
Yeah,
we can only say this so many times. And I think by the fifth or sixth time, where I'm like, it's really cool that he gets to make this. You know what? Richard Kelly made Southland Tales for like $15 million.
Yeah,
and very similar concepts. I engage a lot more with that movie. I've thought about that movie.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm gonna watch Southland Tales more often than I watch this movie.
Yeah, So I
never is still never.
Exist. And I would love for like Southland Tales to have gotten like the same level of discourse rather than a couple of
Southland Tales
people.
is terrible, you guys.
I
will not stand to hear Southland Tales.
I'm sure people
I think
find it
Southland Tales is a
terrible.
way better film than this one, in my opinion.
That's all I'm saying. Like a type of like experimental, wild out there movie that is trying to interrogate and deal with big ideas. At least that is like it is weirdly, vaguely more coherent. You know what the power source of that thing is. You understand the stakes of like what infinite power means in a society. Living building material that can rebuild your face. What do we do with that?
Before we get off this talk to the screen thing, I think the biggest indictment of that concept is like, what are you trying to achieve? Because ultimately, are you just trying to create live theater? Because we had that before movies.
Yeah.
Like a live interaction is not some magical unicorn that we can't find in nature. It's not this unattainable. It's not unobtainium. You literally can go to any community theater and, if you want, stand up and ask the actors a question. Like this is not a difficult thing to achieve. It's difficult to achieve it in film, but it's like, is that a step forward? Is that advancing that, or is it turning around and looking backward?
Because your drunk uncle
I think
coming up with crazy ideas. Yeah.
What we've seen this year, Jeff, is that certain auteurs are obsessed with the idea of movies, like achieving things that have already been done in other media in movies. The biggest example is Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1, right? Like Kevin Costner. That is a quote unquote movie that would have been perfect for television.
Yeah.
And he's like, it doesn't matter. I don't give an F. I want to make the movie version of what that is. And yes, you're right. It can be achieved in live theater. He's like, I don't care. Francis Ford Coppola, he's like, I don't want to direct live theater. I want to make live cinema. Right?
Yeah.
But I guess my point there is that there's nothing particularly impressive about that. It's a trick, but it's a trick that seems regressive. It's not a trick that, I don't know. There's some of his other ideas in the past of, affecting the ending of the movie or stuff like that. Those things feel a little bit more interesting. This just feels like, I don't even know what the point was. I don't know. And
Yeah.
It's a small, very, very small blink and you miss it moment in this movie that's getting an outsized amount of attention, I think. And the movie has much bigger problems than just that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
There are ideas in this movie that it's been percolating since the 80s for him. Like, right, he's been writing it and adding to it and thinking about it for so long. Like, I think they're just like vestiges of other ideas out there. I do want to say it is worth putting him, just looking at him, like 80 something filmmaker. We have a whole bunch of those now, a whole bunch of those like auteurs who are all doing their own things. And it's really fascinating to like see, like Ridley Scott's just like, keep doing my thing. Gladiator 2, sure, why not? Let's keep going. You've got Mad Max guy like continuing to hone his trying to perfect the thing that he started like way back when he was a young filmmaker. It is fascinating to see how they're all dealing with it. Spielberg going both back to his past and remaking West Side Story. So I think the context of it all is really fascinating. I think like that's how the best way to think about this movie is like, wow, it's just wild that he sold all this, sold all his winery stuff to make this money. It is a huge disaster. It is a fascinating object, but it's a terrible movie to me.
Absolutely.
I obviously no way to prove this, but I suspect that 1979's Francis Ford Coppola would not like this movie.
Oh hell yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if I'd go that far. I mean, it's interesting to consider what exactly this movie signifies, right? So like there's two ways to tell the story, in my opinion. One way is this is a guy who mastered the art of cinema at a very young age. And then it was like, hey, I've Alexander wept for there were no more lands to conquer. I'm going to try all kinds of different shit now. I'm going to make a winery. I'm going to make experimental movies, interactive iPad movies, so on and so forth. And this is the latest entry in that saga, and it doesn't really work as a movie, but he's trying new and different things because he's like, the other stuff is old hat.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's one way of looking at it.
True.
Another way of looking at it is this is a person who started as a brilliant filmmaker and whose skills have declined precipitously during that time, and now has ended in the production of one of the worst movies likely to be released in theaters.
I don't think that's a fair assessment. I think I don't think his skill necessarily is the issue here. I think it is taste, and I think that it is. I think it is more the former in that maybe not like everything else is old hat, but like if I'm going to make something at this phase of my life, I want to make something new. I want to make something no one else would make. And there's clearly some message here that he feels very passionately about. And I think that message is very pat, as I've said. And that's unfortunate. I feel like this sort of like, kumbaya ending we haven't really even spoken explicitly about the ending, but the ending is atrocious. It's truly like, it's Neil Breen.
Yes.
In full effect.
Let's go. All go off to Megalopolis.
Fateful Findings had a very similar ending to Megalopolis. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, literally like the Fateful Findings press conference. Wow, you did it. You saved. Like that is what happens in this movie. It's what happens at the end. And then we set a baby down, and we all are supposed to be like, right? I forgot. There's other generations of people coming that we need to think about.
Megalopolis, by the way, it looked like it destroyed Central Park, a thing that people genuinely love in the middle of a huge city to build this Megalopolis. And sure. The movie always failed to tell us why. Why was Megalopolis good, other than him speechifying it?
Or
it's that basic stuff.
What does anyone want?
What does anyone want
at any point want?
Well, we know what Aubrey.
Other than Caesar Catalina, I think we have a clear idea of what he wants. But yeah,
we know what WoW Platinum wants too, which is why she's one of the best characters of this movie and one of the best characters ever made. Yes.
Yeah. And just Jeff, I just want to be clear. I wasn't necessarily saying which one of those versions of the narrative I advocate for. I think it's actually possible to view them to believe in one or both of them. But I think we have seen filmmakers decline over time. Like some filmmakers do get worse over time. That is a thing that happens. The question is whether you view this as part of that flavor of Francis Ford Coppola's story or not.
I
I'm
think
still
storytelling
figuring
is
it
a
out.
skill. I
Yeah,
think storytelling
I'm
is
still
a skill,
figuring it
and
out. Yeah,
everything we have talked about here in terms of what this movie fails at is a failure of storytelling. Why do
I
things
agree.
happen? Who are these people? Introduce this character.
I
Why
agree.
does any of this matter? What is your broader philosophy? To me, that is a failure of storytelling more than anything else. But
Yeah,
it's fascinating,
agreed.
at least.
Agreed.
I also think the methodology is he's trying to be avant-garde in his methodology, as we've kind of summarized, where it wants it to be collaborative. He wants to engage with artists and allow this kind of unforeseen improvisational magic to be part of the experience. And oh my gosh, you want to say to be or not to be? Yes, let's put it in the movie. I think there is a sort of idealistic, kind of, I don't even know the word. This notion that art in and of itself, the sort of ephemeral nature of art and its art in collaboration and not denying the creative spark in, don't deny my creative spark and I won't deny yours. And we'll come into this thing. That sort of kumbaya feeling there too, I think undermines the final product because it just becomes this mishmash of disparate impulses. And I think so all of it is problematic, but I think all of it, from my perspective, comes from this from this good place. Like there's some kind of noble thing at the heart of it that I admire.
It feels
somebody
like
at the end of his life is like, I've got all the money. I don't need anything else. I'm just going to try to put out this beautiful thing into the world. And it just, in the trying, it just spills all over the place and it becomes unruly.
This feels like a final message to society, basically. Like, here, I've made so many things, but this is what I leave you with to hopefully build a better world after. I'm just confused.
I wish that's how the feeling I got from it. But yeah. Anyway, at the end of the day, folks, it is still really impressive that Francis Ford Coppola spent $120 million of his own money to make a movie.
Sure.
Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.